Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for the Graves Lecture Series. Before I introduce our featured speaker, I would like to welcome you to please fill out the surveys I gave you when you arrived, and also sign the guest book if you haven't done so already. Tonight our featured speaker is Dr. Susan Hines. Dr. Hines is CSC's Associate Vice President of Teaching and Learning Technology. And she's going to speak tonight on virtues of change. The title of her talk is Change is God, Thoughts on Life, Work, and Moving to Nebraska. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Susan Hines.
It's not really going to be that serious, folks. It is April Fool's Day, and I did warn Sean that I was going to keep it light. We have a small enough group here that I don't know if I always have to do all the talking. Anybody making some big changes in their life right now? Yeah? Got your hair cut? Well, we can stop at any time and we can talk about change. I actually have found people to be at their most interesting when they are making big changes. That's when you find out who people are, what they're made of. It's how you find out who you are and what you're made of. And as I change a lot, I move a lot. I think those of you who know me know that I have some kind of attention deficit disorder, I'm sure. But I feel like the more you change, the more change becomes, it's not always easy, but it becomes less hard, less difficult. And today I'm kind of going to show you some wonderful and horrible glimpses of my life and what change has been looking like to me lately. So let's get this show started. And I want to show this Prezi. I want a full screen. There we go. Right. I don't think I want keyboard controls. Let me try it one more time. See what change does to me?
I think you have to click yes.
Yeah, okay, I'll allow it. I'll allow this. All right, change is God. How many of you thought I was going to say change is good? Sean told me she got lots of questions about that. I like to drop letters out of words just to confuse people, but the idea actually comes from this idea that God is a verb and not a noun. I don't know if any of you guys have ever run across that. I was talking about that on the radio the other day. I was taking a Bible as lit course in all places, University of Alaska, Fairbanks, and I thought it was a very amazing idea that we need to start looking at the detail as action and not as something that's static. We'll talk a little bit more about how we seem to be sitting there calmly on the couch, but you are spinning on spaceship Earth, who is spinning around our sun at incredible speeds. All right. This is Ocean Beach Pier in San Diego, California. Before I moved to Nebraska, I lived just a few blocks from this idyllic spot. It was a perfect 2-mile run from this little cottage that I rented to the end of that pier and back. And I would try to always set my runs for the sunset. That's my money shot. I got a lot of those when I was there. But there's a little bar right out on this part of the pier. So the pier makes a little T. And you know, you gotta love California. On their fishing pier, you can get a margarita. So why not, in your jog out there, stop by and talk to the locals. And this is a particularly interesting pier because it's actually a local pier. It's not anything you'd see to the north counties in La Jolla. It's not polished, it's old school, local San Diego. And somebody told me the story of the green flash. Have you guys ever heard the story of the green flash? When the sun sets, there's this atmospheric effect where you're supposed to see, just before it drops off into the ocean, you see this flash of green light. And some people say it's not really a flash, Susan, but you're going to see a spectral change in the color on the horizon. So I always timed my runs out there so I could catch this green flash. And I did it like pretty good for a year. I got fit. I ran. I was pretty religious about it. And I never saw that green flash. But one day, on my way back from my run, disappointed that I didn't see the green flash, the little community that I lived in, Ocean Beach, had these great bars, and I just would, I didn't see the green flash. I'm tired of this running. So I just stopped in, and I found that this company has the most amazing IPAs ever. And sometimes you're looking for the change, and then you make a change, and something really good happens. Maybe it's not something as big as an atmospheric event, but it can be something as pleasant as, I found a new and wonderful IPA. Turns out, I went to an IPA festival in Asheville, North Carolina, and this thing won. In the same year, all of that happened. So it's kind of a freakish connection. It's just another confirmation that ye who seek shall find. I'm calling my presentation Changes God because I want everyone who reads the title to do a double take and to wonder. And I think that when we do a double take and wonder, this is when we start to think about difference, change. We all know the familiar expression, change is good, but how many of us really believe that? Show of hands. Change is good. There's a reason it's a cliche. We say it, like, change is good, right? But I don't think most of us really, do most of us really think that? How many believe that? Change is good.
I always think conditional.
Yeah. I think a lot of us imagine that change is going to rock our worlds, right? Oh, God. I remember when I was talking to Sean, hey, we're going to move the librarian offices to the basement. She got fierce. For a lot of us, change is not only bad, but it's horrifyingly unnatural. Like, oh, my God. Our deepest fears are often tied to this thing called change. Uh-oh. Yeah. Let me show you the full picture. Right.
I have a question. If the lights were turned off, would it be brighter?
Thank you. I'm easier to say.
There we go.
Thank you.
Will that
So-
affect your filming, Michael? Will that affect your filming?
He's good. So I actually saw this painting last summer at Burning Man. I did something crazy. I came out to buy a house out here, and I went straight to Burning Man. It was a very weird week. The houses that I saw here were making me question my decisions because they're all whipped out of shape by all the students that have been renting them. So here's an example of maybe what we are afraid of when we have a game changer. When you think about it, it's not only an image like this that gets embedded in our psyches, but if you like science fiction, you know what happens when those gorgeous, beautiful aliens come down the planet and say hi? Well, this is what follows them, right? Send down the robots and kill all the Earthlings. So maybe change is not so good. Maybe change is more something that we more or less have to accept as is. That it just happens, and one of the things that we have to do is, move along. So this just happened to me today. Didn't happen in German. I know we've got the German one up here. It happened in English. But, I'm a technology person. I'm actually here to bring technology to the campus. But when I see this thing happening, and I actually asked for it to happen, I did it to myself once again. I want to learn a new operating system about as much as I want to clean the grout in my bathroom. That's how much I want to do it. But I am subscribing to the philosophy of it is. I'm just going to change. And the more I do it, the more I just say, yep, I'm going to do this now. And yep, I'm going to change that operating system. Let's just do it. Suck it up and go. It just gets easier and easier and easier to do. And I find that not even, I think about myself doing it, but I actually find that when people are doing it around me, I find that they become more interesting. Their change is interesting to me. Their experience with this operating system is interesting to me because we all are more or less changing together. We're all more or less along for the ride. And for those of you who don't think that you are changing, you are. Everything seems still, but you are moving around our planet at 1,000 miles per hour. That might not be accurate. I think that's on the equator. And then you're moving around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour. So we're always moving. We're always changing. I've been watching a little bit of that Cosmos remake. Is anybody else watching it? Anybody else fallen in love with Neil deGrasse Tyson? I'm like, you're my hero, man. I love it. But, you know, that sunset, this whole idea that we are 8 minutes ahead of the sun when it sets, that we're looking back into time, and, you know, by the time it's set, you know, we have already moved ahead in time 8 minutes. You know, we're not really seeing it set. So it's kind of interesting how we are, even when we think that we're asleep, we're really traveling and we're really changing. Everything's spinning, bodies are in motion. So I've been making some big changes lately. I've been in Nebraska now for about 5.5 months. Actually, yeah, 5.5 months, exactly. And while I certainly miss the California coast, this is a little area about 4 blocks from me where I used to live, called Sunset Beach. It was really a great place to catch the sunset. Never saw the green flash there either. Has anybody seen that? I bet, can you see it on the horizons out here? Or? Oh, okay, well good. Now you have something to look forward to. So even though I miss it, I've accepted my change. I learned a lot there. A couple of principles I learned in California is that I can live in 500 square feet, and I think I can go smaller. You know, when you live in a town like San Diego, unless you're an ultra-rich person, you're going to be living in a tiny space. And I lived around a lot of other people living in tiny spaces who learned that, yeah, you know, I used to have a big 4-bedroom house in Missouri. Not me, but friends of mine. I had a 3-bedroom house in Mississippi before I moved to California. But what I've learned is that this sort of change that I've made there has kind of come out to Nebraska with me. And so some ideas that I got in California are helping me out here in really, really big ways. That this sort of string of events, you know, I guess we could say everything happens for a reason, but, you know, the changes, each and every change prepares me in some weird way for the next thing. It probably even guides my choices in the next thing. I tell everybody that every time I move, my brain gets rewired. So I expect that Nebraska is going to change my brain too. I just don't know how or where it's going to come from. But what I can tell you is that the high plains are strikingly beautiful in their own right. This was a picture taken off of one of the main drags just right outside of Chadron. You look to the west and you could just see that storm coming in from Wyoming. And it was one of the, not the most fierce storm that I've seen here, but a really beautiful snowstorm, and it was a heavy snowstorm that day. The change that is most notable for me in Nebraska is I'm now 10 pounds heavier. All I want to do is eat chili and drink hot chocolate and curl up with a good book. Is this a thing? Do I need to get elastic pants? Is this going to stop happening? Now I want to sort of run around in the park, but then the snow is back today. So I am learning how to cope with that. In Southern California, you can't not stay fit. It's a requirement. They boot you out of the state. There are always these tan, you know, really healthy people zipping past my yard. And then I was just, you know, you just go with them. You run with that crowd. You eat a lot of salad and get healthy when you're there. Here, it's a little different. It's a different kind of change. I know that some people would say that's a bad change, but I'm kind of enjoying chili and hot chocolate right now. Who wouldn't? So while I've forgotten that I have a body to take care of, I do have something new going on in my life. I have this thing called a house again. I hadn't had a house for a couple of years. I was renting in California. Real humans can't afford to buy houses near the beach. They just rent other people's wee cottages. So I actually bought this house like a week before your terrible, terrible storm. And during my drive, so I think I was in Casper, Wyoming, when the VPAA here called me and asked me where I was on the road. He wanted to tell me about this big storm, and I'm like, oh great, that's just my luck. Some tree is gonna fall in that house, and I just bought it, and I'm gonna be, But it has these big spruces, and nothing happened to it. And Wilson Park, which was across the street, that had almost every tree was clipped in a big, big way, miraculously spared my house. And that little patch, if you guys know the area that I'm talking about, very few trees were down because the park, we were saved by the park pretty much. So I happened to have lucked into a pretty good block. So while I was pretty excited to have a house again, and I guess everybody in here is a homeowner because you can afford houses in Nebraska, right? And you're in your new home now, mm-hmm. Okay. But I forgot about what it's like to have a new home. This house had a lot of problems, and for the first month, I lived here. I was having the windows replaced and the floors redone because it was pretty run-down house, but it had like good bones. You know, it had wood floors and it had windows. It wasn't really a bad life. All of my stuff was my stuff that I moved, that storm just delayed everything. It delayed the people who were working on the floor, the people who were replacing the windows, and the people who were driving the truck up to deliver the furniture. So I was garage camping for a month. And if I looked a little, disheveled at work that first month, but I had what I needed. I had my grill, I had an internet connection, and I had my e-reader. That's a pretty complete life right there. I think I could get by for a year on that. Although cooking inside, don't do it. I did take the grill outside and cook outside. My digs at work were similarly Spartan. I wasn't real sure where I was going to make my office, but I knew I was going to be with my tribe, my librarian tribe. And to get them to come to the basement, I had to go to the basement. And I found the storage room that was full of stuff, a bewildering amount of stuff that we cleaned out and we painted, and within a month's time, it was reasonably comfortable. And by the time I was in that office in a reasonably comfortable way, I was also getting into the house in a reasonably comfortable way. Whenever I ask myself, Hines, what the hell are you doing? Why did you leave this beautiful paradise to come to this? I tell myself, especially when I look at this, and by the way, this is now gone. There's nothing more fun than yanking out a toilet with a pink shag cover on the top of it. It was a totally destroyed toilet too. I don't even understand what hard water is, but it's really tough on toilets. And then I got the mold finally. But when I ask myself, what am I doing? It's pretty clear. I'm here to cure the mold and to get rid of the shag. I understand my purpose, and that is what I would call change made flesh right there. So demo was fun, and so was renovation. For the next month, after camping out in the garage, I spent the next month living amid the drywall dust. I don't know if any of you guys have ever lived in a house when you've been doing drywall. I'm pretty sure it cut a month and a half off my life. When I die, I'm gonna go, drywall, and then I'll give up the ghost. But this room actually had this really weird, I don't know what to call it. It wasn't what I would really call, it wasn't real wood. It was this faux wood.
It's paneling.
It was paneling. Yeah, this.
We have a lot of in Midwest Nebraska. Sugar. And lots of colors.
Well, this paneling, you could touch it, and it was like, there's like some little hollowness between the paneling. And so the walls were plaster, and the paneling was hammered into the plaster. And I'm thinking, why didn't I see that paneling when I bought the house? Hey. And that's because when I bought the house, it was the best house I found out of the 20 that I looked at. So renovation, for all of its horribleness, eventually it was great just to have my drywall up, and I actually I don't do my own drywall, but I did participate in the misery of that part of the renovation. Anybody renovated a house here? Everybody's renovated a house here, right? It's constant renovation. So I don't know really, when you think about it, what could be better than fresh drywall in a renovated home? Well, maybe that. That looks pretty good, right? These are my buds back in San Diego. And interestingly enough, I was looking for some photos when I was going to do this presentation. And it's funny, this one came up and I'm like, not one of those people is still in San Diego. And that photo was only taken a year ago. Was taken a year ago, that's January. We're out ocean kayaking. Matt and Jackie are in Arizona now, and Angela is somewhere in the Caribbean. She took a academic job in the Caribbean. I'm like, well, I guess you can't leave San Diego for that. Well, I'm going to show you this picture because one of the things I also noticed when I looked at this group of people is that they are all changing fast too. They all have lived in a lot of different places. They all gravitate towards port cities and the ocean. And we've all had long conversations over lots of booze about change. You know, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Why do we find these places interesting? And if you've ever lived in a port city, and I've lived in a few of them, San Diego and Vancouver, British Columbia, Savannah, Georgia, they all have a lot of things in common. There's a lot of different kinds of people there. It's always changing. Living next to the ocean itself, for all of San Diego's perfect 75-degree weather, there's all this fog and it's always changing. The waves are changing, the light is changing. It is a place of change, and I think it makes perfectly good sense to me that you find people who love change in port cities and along the seaboards and out on the piers. And it seems like a perfectly natural place for them to be. Now, I'm not sure if Californians are really all that different from anybody else. You know, I'm trying it out with Nebraskans. And what the love of or interest in change actually is. I'm not sure if it's in the DNA of Californians. I'm not a Californian. I'm real attracted to California largely because of everybody loving change. It's constantly changing. I was recently in Thailand, and what I loved about Bangkok is it's constantly changing. You know, you have these huge skyscrapers growing out of bizarre little shanty towns, and you just see these crazy layers of change that are going on in the city. So I don't know if it's in the DNA or if it's simply the result of a lot of fresh produce and yoga. What I do know is that I don't see stuff like this on our library poster boards, but I certainly do see that on library bulletin boards in Southern California schools. I don't know if our faculty and staff are this flexible. Anybody do any Zumba in here? What is Zumba? Zumba is kind of a weird jazzercise Latin yogic event. I tried it twice, couldn't keep up either time. Maybe I should try it not in California and see how I do. This is representative of our change. And I did eventually want to talk a little bit about the library because this is our last lecture series. It may even be the last time we do a Graves lecture in here because we are changing some other areas of the basement, which might be a little bit more conducive to what we do when we do these Graves lectures. But I did want to talk a little bit about this change because the library is making some pretty big changes these days. I actually took this picture today, so it's fresh off the presses. And what you have here is an example of some changes that are happening in the periodicals section. In my quest to put reading right in front of the noses of people, we've moved some comfortable couches there. We actually had to move these forward because we are moving the whole fiction collection, which is in the basement, hiding away from the students. We're going to move those up to a coffee shop, which will be right behind this periodical section in the library. And when the coffee shop gets up here, this will be kind of a nice separation from the chaos of coffee and cafe and the people who are serious readers of periodicals. We want to put the fiction collection over by the coffee so that I can just walk through with a cup of coffee in my hand and say, have you read this book? And just sort of like Johnny Appleseed, here kids, start reading. It is a concern of mine that while our numbers in the library, we've got really good numbers now. We have, in the last, from October to February this year, have had more than 30,000 entries and exits in the library versus the same months last year. In the previous academic year, it was 15,000. So we actually doubled our numbers in the library. We've made some really big changes. I don't know how many of you, especially those of you in the community, are aware, but the library isn't even a library anymore. We're now a library learning commons, and we've got a lot of other offices in the building, including IT, student services, food services, and academic affairs. So we got a lot of stuff going on in here, and I think there might even be some other folks coming, and we're going to be building out some things in the basement as well. So just to give you an idea, our change looks pretty normal, but it's a big change. And I think for those of you who've been at Chadron State College for a while, or I think some of you are going, what is going on up there? Because our changes are sometimes in fits and starts, but we are making some big ones, and we hope that you'll continue to visit the library to see what is coming up new. We are changing out our holdings. We have a big weeding project. It's not as exciting as it sounds, really, but we're taking out the old books that aren't read anymore, and we're replacing them with new books. So we have a big project just to completely revitalize our holdings as well in the library. So while the changes afoot here in Nebraska are not as exciting as this is the exotic grilled rat that I ran across in Thailand just recently. I did not sample the exotic grilled rat, and maybe we're not as exciting as this. I did actually sample the wine and the barbecue at Burning Man. It was actually quite tasty. Barbie doll heads everywhere. I'm finding out that Nebraska does have its quirks. And I was actually here on a Friday driving back from Scotts Bluff, and I thought, I think I'll go look at that car hinge thing. And I did. And it was really, really windy, so I didn't look at it for too long. But I
didn't need to.
Well, actually, I walked all the way back here where there's this other car art, and then there's some sculptural stuff that's planted in the ground that's kind of interesting as well. So, there's change afoot here, you are not going to find, you're not going to find, sharks at the playground like you will in Santa Barbara. And you're not going to be able to grow your own wine, but I have it on good authority. You can grow a pretty mean baby carrot in your own backyard. That's it, gang. You want to talk about change? We got a little time. Who's changing in here?
Before your adulthood and a lot of the changes, did you stay pretty much put in Atlanta, or did you move around?
No. I have lots of people said, Susan, are you a military brat? And I'm like, I'm just a brat, not a military anything. But no, I grew up in Atlanta, same house, right up to age 17 before I moved. And then I moved all the way to Fairbanks, Alaska, because I wanted a big change. And it was a big change. It was an adventure. It wasn't an adventure that anybody in my family understood or was happy about. But both of my brothers now live on the West Coast. They've changed. They love the West Coast. My sister stayed in Atlanta, and she changes my siblings really are changeaholics too, because every time I visit my sister, her house is different. She's moved furniture, so she's like changing in a very sort of different way. She's an attorney for the Supreme Court of Georgia, and she's studying nutrition because she wants to change when she's done with all that lawyering stuff, and she wants to help people grow organic food and eat the right foods. And I'm like, well, that is a noble goal. And she's already starting, she's already off on that interesting change because, as she says, I want to have a really good third act. What about you guys? Anybody working on something, hatching a plan you want to? Because once you've told us, then you have to do it. That's why it's good to out yourself when you like. I'm going to build a tiny house this summer. Anybody know what a tiny house is?
Birdhouse.
Not a bird. Well, it's like a birdhouse for people.
Oh, one of those small houses that is the trend these days.
I went to a workshop for tiny house building last February, and and after living in 500 square feet, I'm like, yeah, I can live in 128 square feet. What the heck? Who needs stuff? So I'm going to build one because I've always wanted to build one. I like renovation. This will be take me from renovating to actually building something. So I want the experience, but I'm really thinking about using it at some point. So that's my big goal. Who's got a big goal? I also have to goals at work. We're working on the library. Another big goal, to get it settled, to get everybody, all the tenants in. We've got some pretty happy tenants. We've got some pretty happy tenants in the library right now. But there's a lot to do. So, and also to get that work done as well. You guys want to share?
The changes I'm seeing in the library, the learning center.
It's funny. It's people, the staff people will go, yeah, okay, Susan. And the students will go, I hate it. Our student workers will go, what are you doing? I love their honesty too. I tell them there's method to my madness. Be patient. Change is a brewing. So yeah, I'm glad that you like the changes in the library. I'm hoping that with our changes to the holdings and getting some new books in, I just watched the interim library director is working still for us on a once a week she comes in and she's clearing out some of the old fiction, the old biographies that just need to be replaced. Lots of damaged books, lots of books that pages have turned to a kind of dust. So we've got a lot of that going on.
Well, I know they cleared out a lot of the books, and I don't see a return to the volume because so much is online. But what types of the books are you replacing?
Well, we just recently replaced a lot of our music holdings because the music department was going up for professional accreditation, and we wanted to make sure that we had at least all the book titles on order. Some have come in, but it was a big debate. Do they come in and see a lot of old, outdated music books, or do we make sure or they come in and see a very slim holdings and know that we're going to fatten it up in the next few months? But for all of the academic disciplines, we're doing very deliberate weeding, working with the departments and with the RCL, which recommends the kinds of holdings we should have for a library our size. And then we make those recommendations out to the department. So even though that's not as noticeable as moving a coffee shop in, it certainly is a very, very important part of what we're doing. And I think that eventually, when people see more in-date, especially our science holdings, those are really important to keep up to date. And I saw a lot of science books leaving the shelves today, and I was looking at them, and I was looking at dates like 1932. You know, think about it. Psychology in the 1960s, or well, early 1950s, was recommending a lobotomy. We shouldn't do that anymore. We know better now. Books that advocate that aren't anything we want our students to get their hands on. So we are definitely working on things like that. So yeah, big changes in the building, and we are also working on our digital changes. We now have some blogs in place, so we will be using social media more and more to explain what's going on into the library. So if you use Facebook or Twitter, or you know, just want to subscribe to what we call an RSS feed, which is a kind of syndication, digital syndication that you guys can subscribe to. So anytime you come into your Facebook or your Twitter account, you can see what's happening in the library. We'll be doing that in the next 3 or 4 months, and when the kids come back in the fall, hopefully we'll have something that seems a little more hip to our young people. I don't even know if they use that word hip anymore. They say lame. That's lame.
What are you doing with the old books?
The old books go to, what's the name of the company? Better World Books. They actually get shipped off to a company that then redeploys the ones that are going to be useful. And
Internationally?
Internationally, yeah. Locally, you know, there might be some local reasons to keep a book. If we have a really old volume that, you know, is a classic like Origin of Species or any Dickens, we may even keep those in multiple copies if there's some value to their. I mean, there's author's editions, and then there are. You know, I was published in 1932, and I don't have a cover anymore, and I'm very scruffy, and you already have 2 other better copies of the book. So it's an interesting project. I didn't know very much about how libraries turned around their holdings until I got here, and I found that it's a lot more laborious. It's actually a 2-year project. It was a 5-year project, but because I like change, I'm like, can we do it in less time than 5 years? Because that's a lot of years to get this thing turned around. So every week, librarians are going through books, and we're looking at ways to improve that. I'm very conscious, too, about getting, my background is in English literature. So I've got 3 degrees in English literature. I was just telling somebody a story today about somebody asked me, what are you going to do with a worthless degree like that? And I thought, make people read one day. And so my plan is to try to get people more interested in looking at the holdings that we have and doing more reading here. Sean has been instrumental in making the library more of a venue for academic events. And I think it might be time for us to host a couple of book clubs here. We already do this Graves lecture, and we've got some good spaces for things like that. Other library questions? All right. Anybody else want to confess to a big change that they're making? I can see you guys in the summer driving behind my house going, where's that tiny house she was talking about?
So are you going to have it like where you can put it on a trailer and move it around?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That's what they are, they're portable. Okay.
Yeah. Trailers have never, like the kind of modular trailers that you see, they've never done anything for me because they just look like, I don't know. To me, they're just like not my style. I'm not going to come out and say that trailers are ugly, but that's what I said. I think trailers are ugly. These little tiny houses built out of wood.
They're really cute.
Very cute.
They have a new special on one of these channels, the renovation channel, and I don't know what channel it is, but there is a guy that builds tree houses. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And I am telling you, he does the dangest thing with tree houses. And if you're going to build a little house, you ought to get on the internet. And I think if you just Googled tree houses, this guy would come up because he's that famous and that good. But you would get some fabulous ideas for a little house because that's really what he's doing. I'm just saying, you know.
Maybe I really want to live in a tree. Maybe I don't want to live in an actual house. I maybe want to go.
But you know, his ideas are so clever. So many of them you would incorporate into your mini house.
I love the idea of just to come back to the notion of change, that everything can serve multiple purposes. So I wanted to build a real solar conscious LED house, and they sell these big, like, they're Japanese tubs. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they can be like you kind of step into them. They conserve room, but they also function so you can take a little washing machine and you put it inside the tub when you're not using it, and it just sort of locks and loads, and then it uses the faucet from the washing machine. And when you're ready to take yourself a little shower or bath, you just pull it out, and and you've got like this much space. But it's a really, I love the whole idea that any one thing can have at least 5 different ways to use it. And those little houses are just full of those great ideas. And, I'm just very curious to see if I can build one, because
Your exercise, changing.
get rid of that, what I call my Nebraska 10. Does everybody get a Nebraska 10? Is that a thing? Okay. And then in the summer, it goes away, right? Tell me it goes away. No, it stays, and then you get another 10. Oh my God. All right. Well, gang, I hope all of you have filled out the material that Sean gave you. By the way, we're doing this because I put her up to it. We want to make sure that we're getting feedback and on these, and we want to find out more about what you might want in the next coming year, what you might want to see in the fall, or heck, feel free to put some notes about what you even might want to see in the library. We're open to change here. We can't really help but not change here.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the coffee shop's going to be arranged? I know what the previous one was like, but
I wondered what that was.
I
have your periodical wall, but is it going to be more?
I don't know if I can tell you right now. I was having what I would call it was like an adult tantrum. You know, have you ever seen little kids when they do this, like ah? I was talking to John Hanson about this coffee shop. About 3 of us looked right after the holidays. I came back and it was like, there's still a hole in the wall. I ran over to John and was like, and I said, look, I'm ready to be angry, crazy lady about this coffee shop. And he goes, no, angry, crazy lady is not going to do it here. And I'm like, really? Because I can just put on my angry, crazy lady hat and go into it and come right back out. But he got on the phone with somebody, and maybe he threatened that there might be an angry, crazy lady. But all of a sudden, we started to get some traction, and the coffee shop is going to be, it's completely out of our hands. We don't have a whole lot of say in what the food service is going to be. But there's not going to be a barista. There is nobody who will be there to make special coffee drinks. There will be a kind of upgraded coffee. It's not Maxwell House that they're brewing in pots, but there is going to be some kind of better coffee there. Trust me, the students have already emailed me about it. They're not happy. And I told them, maybe you guys need to just circulate a petition to try to get the coffee that you really want in the library. And then they're going to sell mainly packaged sandwiches there. One of the things that we're doing to that space is that we are bringing a lot of shelving in, and we're going to make it look a little bit more like a bookstore coffee house. when we bring the fiction collection up there. And as I tell the librarians, books are also pretty good soundproofers. So to keep what I call the party side of the library a little quiet from the studious people who are getting tutoring on the other side of the library. So we're actually deliberately putting up some shelves, not just to get people to read, but to soundproof it a little bit, because the main floor is going to be a bit of a zoo when all of the things are up and running. Strangely enough, we've been keeping a pretty close eye on where the students are sitting. We spy on them. We take a person count 4 times a day to see where people are languishing, and where would you guys guess are the hot spots? We play the game called Hot or Not. These are our hot spots in the library, and these are not our hot spots in the library. And
We've say anything close to a window.
Not
Really?
necessarily. They're more medium range.
Really?
Yeah.
The IT desk.
I was gonna say, when I walked in, it seemed like they were.
Hot. The computers are hot. The IT desk is hot and cold. Sometimes people come in, I think it's when anybody's having a problem, but we have learned, any Laurie Anderson fans in here? Anybody listen to crazy old Laurie Anderson? Well, she's got she's one of those electro musicians, but she's got a saying that says, technology is the fire around which we tell our stories. And it is very, very true that where our students are sitting are right around these computers that are right around the pillars. And it's telling that they are not in the stacks. We don't find them in the stacks unless they have passed out. We have a few sleepers on the couches upstairs that are regular and reliable. But for the most part, we have people coming into the library to use the wireless, and they are in front of the computers, and that is where our big counts are. This isn't unusual for libraries at colleges our size. It's not unusual for libraries to be moving into the Learning Commons reconfiguration. It's survival in an age that no longer has what we call paper flakes between cowhide. We now have a lot of digital books, and we are hiring an electronic resources librarian. We don't have anybody on our hook yet, but we definitely have an ad out there. And this person will be very important as we move forward with what we're doing with the library.
When I was asking about the arrangement and the coffee, I was thinking not so much the food or that, but kind of the seating arrangement or where people were gathering. Are you thinking about like the comfortable chairs in there, or being able to have outlets so you can plug in your
Oh yeah,
laptop and
what we're trying to
those
do.
kind of things?
So if you're facing the coffee house, the reference desk is behind you, and down here you have where the periodicals used to be. This is where fiction is coming up in this area. And we'll be configuring shelves so that people have, one of the librarians uses the expression hidey holes, places to hide away in between the shelves and drink your coffee and sit in a comfortable chair. But just our good fortune, there are all these electrical strips against those walls. When we pulled away the periodical shelving, that whole strip runs across the whole back wall, and I just thought, coffee house. we're gonna have people with their laptops to plug in.
Well, and I've noticed that since you moved the periodicals, a lot of students are congregating in that corner now.
Because the periodicals got in their way.
Have you really noticed that, Cheryl?
Yeah.
I haven't. Over where we moved the furniture over.
Yeah, because you have to walk through there to get to the bathroom.
But do you see what she means, Joy? You know, where the strips are? It'll be somewhat, she calls it a hidey, what I call it kind of a booth. Like, you know,
Yeah.
you have borders look.
When you walk into a restaurant,
That's what I'm
you
thinking.
get the booth. You don't get the table. You go for the booth. So we're trying to create more
Intimate
booths.
space.
Yeah.
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 And the other plan is just to try to push more of the coffee house traffic into the corner and away from the reference librarian, so that when people come up to talk to the reference librarian, they can actually hear the reference librarian talk back. Because I have gotten we've had some conversations, they're funny conversations among librarians. You know, this is the stuff of librarianship. How loud do you think is too loud? When should we go? Shh. And Christine Fullerton showed me this library with what was called noise control zones. And there were very complicated systems of zones in the library, and how loud you could be in this zone versus this zone. And I'm like, do people obey those zoning rules and restrictions? What we know is that the main floor is going to be loud and chatty. What we are preserving on the third floor is what looks like the traditional library. All the stacks are, for the most part, going to be shifted up there, except for fiction, and the periodicals are going to be on the main floor. And then we're hoping to put a lot more technology in the basement. We are trying to get a testing center put in to one of these rooms back here. I just drove up from Scottsbluff. I went and visited a testing center in Scottsbluff and got, oh my God, these things are more complicated than I thought. To do anything from testing future doctors to doing the praxis tests that they do in the Department of Ed on campus pretty often, from what I understand. That's what's really driving the testing center. And we have hopes of putting some more media labs downstairs. People really, the one place in the basement that gets a whole lot of use is the 106, which is where we have a pretty serious lab. Any more?
Is that lab open to students to use, or is it mostly for faculty like we're doing the
We're using it for
learning
workshops right now. Cheryl, you're even scheduled to teach in it in the fall, right? Mm-hmm. So we can schedule people to teach in it. Students use it. When I stay here late at night, sometimes it's a lot of fun. There are like 20 guys in there, all like, they're watching something, but at least they're watching it together. We have a student lounge down here as well that I've been talking with John Hansen about getting some funds from student services to fix up and to make a little more sort of technologically compelling for students to use, so that people can do joint projects. Instead of all of these big football players sitting around this tiny little screen, have one big screen so that all the football players can then sort of sit around in a semicircle and just make that technology available for them to use here. Because I think most of the students maybe are packing a laptop or a tablet, not a whole lot of desktop equipment in people's student dorms anymore.
Are you going to go through a formal process to officially change the name and include the Learning Commons, or what's involved with that?
We have a sign that got really sad that we took down. The snow and the wind were just killing it. Kind of like, I can't wait to see this hail that people have told me about, by the way. Horizontal, do you really get softball-sized horizontal hail in Nebraska?
Yeah.
All right. There's a change that might not be so good.
You're going to feel different as a homeowner.
Yes.
Because it's a killer for a homeowner.
Yeah, that was the one change that we had on our first house hunting trip here. Was we got what we called a Nebraska hood ornament. We got a softball-sized hail dip.
Yeah, a friend of mine here I don't know what she was telling me that, well, it looks like you could pull your car under this arch, because I don't have the house that I'm in, they built in the garage. And I'm like, well, why would I want to do that? And she goes, you're going to want to do that when you get a hailstorm. And I'm like,
Thank you.
what is this thing called hail? I know not of it. But apparently I'm going to get to know it. Did I answer a question, or did I wander off somewhere
No.
in La La Land?
I want to make one comment, and that's because someone very dear to me is here. And you've talked about change is God, and we've talked about renovations. We've talked about moving offices and how difficult it was for to move. But then,
But I bet you could move again and it would be less traumatic.
and true. But
That was a humoring comment, I think.
But you could also have personal changes to your life that can be good and can sometimes not be so good. And in visiting with Andrea, who was, this is my friend Andrea Voss, she was diagnosed with cancer. And we discussed that and the changes that it brought to you personally.
So for you, change is. It's neither.
Profound.
Yeah,
just in the last few months. I was diagnosed with breast cancer August 16th. I sent my daughter on a trip around the world. That following week, did not tell her, my only daughter, did not tell her because I knew she wouldn't go. So that was really tough. And then, did lots and lots of research, and finally decided on a lumpectomy and radiation, and then finished that after she got back. I caught it really early. I only had to have 16 treatments, but it is life-changing.
So let me, not to
It
get
is
too
very
nosy,
life-changing.
but since you told us this, how are the changes that you're making in your life, how are you realizing those? What is really changing?
You don't put off. You know, if I want to, I've spent more time with Sean since I've been home with radiation for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
She and I used to live right down the street. We raised our children together. And then I moved to a different part of town, and you wouldn't think that little change would be so significant, but it was really a huge change on our friendship because we couldn't walk back and down the street.
And have a drink on Wednesday night.
Well, I wasn't going to say that, but since you did. But anyway.
Proximity is everything. It
Yeah,
really
well,
is.
and then also as our children got older, you know, they weren't so inclined to include us. You know, when they're in grade school, come on, Mom, let's go down to Boss's. You know, when they get 16, they're like, okay, we're leaving. you know,
too, Andrea, your priorities. Talk about
yeah, and your priorities really change. You talk about all this moving, and I'm thinking to myself, I have been doing pretty much exactly the same thing for 30 years, which is a very short period of time in the history of our ranch, which was homesteaded in 1884, right out here north of town. And I have been primarily doing the same thing for the last 30 years, and my life has been much easier than my grandmother's life was, or than my great-grandmother's life was, but the ranch was primarily run by women. And one of the things I hope to do is be a little more active about writing a book about this ranch, and because so rare is a ranch of this size survived when it has been primarily run by women. I mean, that's really significant.
I think last summer my mother passed away. She went very quickly, and I was actually in Santa Barbara. I got a call from my sister, and the sound of her voice was, catching the plane tonight. All I had to do was my sister, who never sounds that way. And I did more traveling after, when I got back to California after her death. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just traveling. I was just cutting through space and time like I had never done before, because you don't want to put anything off.
Yes.
Whether I really was feeling like I don't want to not experience everything. Mm-hmm. And I know you can't possibly do that. We do live we humans live relatively short lives. Ranches live longer than we do.
Oh, Maya.
But yeah, I think it's an important...
Any improvement we do on the ranch, we try to make sure, a lot of times if you're doing an improvement in your house, you're like 30-year shingles. Well, I got to tell you, I don't want 30-year shingles. I'm looking for a 100-year shingle, and they don't do 100-year shingles. And we're trying to find a bridge right now. I'm not looking for the cheapest lumber, and I'm trying to find lumber that's 4 3/4 of an inch thick. That's hard.
Anybody got some lumber?
No, you can't,
All right.
you can't get it here. I happen to be really good friends with the guy who owns the lumber yard. They don't make it anymore.
Wow.
You can't even get it anymore. But when you are dealing with a project like I'm not looking for a mini house. I'm looking for big bridge planks. So we might be at the opposite spectrum, but it's still a goal and still a project that I am passionate about, and I'm sure you will be passionate about yours.
Mm-hmm. I think building anything, just the act of building something is an act of change. You are carving out something where there wasn't anything before, and there are all kinds of crazy reasons to do things. I will do things like, I didn't eat that rat that I showed you guys. But I did eat some pretty dicey stuff when I was in Thailand, because I was actually traveling with people And this is another change I've noticed. I'm getting older. I'm traveling with a crowd that was a little, like when you notice somebody is, for the first time in my life, I'm like, hey, you really are 10 years younger than me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go catch a break, and I can't stay in this bar until 1 in the morning with you.
Well, see, and I am thinking, I don't know how well that rat would have settled in this system I got going here. Now, it might have worked a little better 15 years ago, but I don't know about the rat.
Here, it's a lot like chicken.
Everything tastes a lot like chicken. That doesn't mean your system's going to take it like chicken, you know?
Yeah, but what I do know is change cascades. The more you, what I experienced for several months, and probably part of the reason I came out here was, hey, am I going to be a beach bum? I think it's better. I think it might be time to change. Beach life is pretty idyllic, don't get me wrong, but you can get too comfortable. I was getting pretty comfortable, and I'm uncomfortable with comfort.
So you don't see yourself here for a long period of time?
I see myself staying until the things that need to be changed are changed. And then I think once everything's done, or as I like to joke, not unless I marry a cowboy. I hear they don't like beaches, you know.
Well, they can't swim.
They can't. They don't know what to do out there.
Cowboys
So
can't swim. They don't like water.
She's married to a cowboy.
Yeah, I'm married to a cowboy, and he cannot swim.
So you just never know. But I know that I have taken on a challenge, and there are some things that that we are changing and building and doing for the benefit of the college and the people who have. This is another interesting change for me. I'm actually have been working with companies and campuses that are constantly changing. So one of the new things that I have at this college is people who are rooted here, who have had long lives and experiences with the campus. And one of the things that I have to actually really think hard about is this change can affect somebody for a lot longer than it's ever going to affect me. And I really try to, think very carefully about, what it is that we're putting together and why we're putting it together. Because I've, since leaving my home in Atlanta, never lived anywhere for more than 5 years. I can tell you that somewhere about age 38, I just woke up one morning and I thought, this might be my normal, in the same way that it's very normal for family members of mine and friends of mine to settle down and settle in. I think it seems a little weird, but I finally just made peace with it because I did try to settle down and settle in several times, and I just have found that I am not, maybe one day when I'm too old to move. But I'm pretty sure I'll have a fast and high-tech wheelchair when that time comes, because I do like the technology. But I think it's as normal. It's an all as my mother might have put it. What is going on with you? I remember the first time I told her I was teaching online, and I had a remote position where I could live anywhere I want and just teach, from my laptop. And my mother said, "What the hell is that? That's not a job." And I'm like, "No, they really pay me to do this, Mom." Well, it doesn't sound right. Why would anybody do that? That was her attitude. She hadn't changed in a while, and didn't really know about the whole online education thing when I talked with her about it. My older brother suggested to her that I was probably just running drugs, and it made her a little like, "What? What are you really doing?" So lots of good family jokes about that. If she were alive and knew that I'd made this change, she would probably be very happy. She would say, "Well, that sounds like a normal job. Thank you." I don't trust those people in California. And she's a Southerner. I don't trust those people in California anyway.
She would have liked this old Nebraska.
Yeah, she would. I think in a lot of ways, this is it's kind of nice to be in a place where I walk back and forth to work. I don't mind the snow as much as I would have thought because I don't drive in it. You know, I can go out and not have to, you know that thing you all have to do to your cars, this thing and then that thing, and I don't do that. I just leave this huge like dome of snow on my car, and then I don't drive it because I can't. It's undrivable. And then every now and then a neighbor will help me out with a snowblower. But I have this neighbor. I don't know. I don't think any of you are my neighbors. I have this neighbor who like this morning, was walking to work, and there was maybe that much snow on the ground, but this neighbor gets out there early and just does the whole driveway, even the front where the curb is. And this thing is, you know, it's melted by 2 o'clock this afternoon. So you guys are nodding your head. You know this type?
We all do this.
My neighbor does that.
What's with that? You know it's going to melt by 2 o'clock. What's going on, neighbor?
It's the 10-pound thing. I'm just kidding.
That's how you keep the 10 pounds off.
That's winter exercise. I'm just kidding.
Well, gang, I think we all need to get out of here. But if you see me doing something unseemly for Nebraska, you can just jerk me aside and say, Susan, we don't say stuff like that here. That's not done. And then I'm going to do it anyway.
Well, thank you, Susan, and those of you that were late coming, if you'd sign this guest book, that'd be great, and drop off your surveys. And thanks again, Dr. Hines, that was interesting and
I hope
very
it was
enjoyable.
not too intellectual.
Thank you.
That's not what I was shooting for.